How you doing, folks? You're watching Live with Onrie, and I'm your host, Onrie Compen. Today, we got a really awesome dude in the house. This guy's all over the internet. I don't even know how I managed to get him to come on the show, but here he is, and it is a pleasure to welcome him. TRAVIS GIBB, how you doing, sir?
Good. Are you worried about your chest with that hit? Like I'm concerned.
Oh, absolutely. It's I just want to make sure that, I'm pounding my chest, goddammit. It's my show. The 800 pound gorilla is arrived in the house. Absolutely. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Why don't you do us all a favor? I'm going to give you the spotlight. You can pound your chest or do whatever you like, but do us a favor and tell us who you are and what you do.
Me, TRAVIS GIBB. I am a writer best known for this little book right here called Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. I funded 3 of those on Kickstarter. I've also been known to produce The Avocator, which is a book that came out last year. A lot of people picked it up. I'm live right now on Kickstarter with a book called Voodoo Nations, but upcoming, a lot of people are talking about what I have next, which is Cthulhu Invades Oz. So I've got a lot of stuff going on. I'm known for a lot of stuff, but yeah, that's me. That's who I am.
Right on, man. So I'm interested in finding out more about this broke down for dead bodies book you got.
Okay.
Here, 'cause I got to tell you, the premise sounds pretty intriguing. Can you tell me a little bit about this book? Because I think you might have sold me on it just from the title itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of it, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
The title's supposed to tell you what's going on. So what it is, it's about 2 guys, Randy and Denver. They break down on the side of the road. They have 4 dead bodies in their trunk and a case. And everybody's out to get them, from a motorcycle gang to the police department to the mafia in the local area. Everyone's trying to get them and figure out what's in this case. And the stickler to all that is these 2 people hate each other. One just got out of prison. The other one is just a goof off and doesn't care. So they are fighting and arguing. And we just follow down that track, see why the case is there, why it's important, is there a setup, all the typical crime stuff. But it's done in a unique way. Like, it's not dark and dreary. The comic book, I'm not sure you can see it, but here, let me grab a good page.
Are you taking more of like a dark comedy approach to this?
It is, but I'm also saying it's a lot brighter. Like, I don't make it all dark and shadows. So it's like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Lots of guns, lots of violence, lots of F words. That's
awesome, man. Yeah, I think you sold me on this one. So after the show ends, you're going to have to tell me where, you'll tell us all where we can buy it. But after this episode is over, I'll definitely support you. So what got you into comics? Like, how did you fall into this field, and what got you to this point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to make comics, but I'm not going to do superheroes. I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to do something offbeat and, just run with it.
Well, I mean, first off, of course I want to write superheroes. Everybody wants to write superheroes, but all the best superheroes are already made. Like, I don't care what you came up with. It's not as good as Spider-Man. I'm just saying. That's it. I don't care how cool it is. Spider-Man's the best.
I would agree with you on that.
But seriously, as a young child, I always loved comics. I read comics my whole entire life. I'm from Rochester, New Hampshire, which is right next to Dover. Dover, New Hampshire is where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were found. Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird were right there. I'm 40 years old, so I was in the cusp of them being a mega superstar. And, our local area papers talking about local guys, all these things. There were cons, all these things. So comics and indie comics were kind of in my blood, doing that. I came down to Florida in early 2000 to get a degree in film. That was working out really well, but I ended up getting a young girl pregnant, so I decided to write some comics instead. So
now wait before you go any further, you got to pound your chest, bro. There you go.
So I didn't pursue the thing in film just because of the long hours, the long work that it would take. I did write a couple of comics from 2003 to 2005, so you can find me. And I actually did pretty well. It was in Image, a book called Negative Burns. Are you familiar with Negative Burns?
I am not, actually, but that's
so Negative Burns is a big deal if you're a comic like connoisseur. So Neil Gaiman, Brian Michael Bendis, Alan Moore, all of their early work is all in Negative Burns. So it was a small little anthology story that was pretty easy to get into if you had the right talent. So you can find a lot of early work from all these superstars in Negative Burns. I happen to be in that. Not in any of the issues that they were in, but I was in it.
You made the cut.
Right.
So okay. So you took some time to focus on raising your family and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I raised my daughter. She just turned 18 this year and
congratulations.
moved out of the house. Yeah.
Wow. That's a double congratulations. Depending on how you felt about her moving out.
I love my kids. She could stay here forever if she wants to. She does not want to, and she did make it miserable once she was here. But I wouldn't have her leave for the world. She's your kid. What are you gonna do?
Exactly.
So I married my wife 3 years ago, and she was looking. I was just sitting with her in bed, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I used to write comics." And she's like, "You used to write comics?" Yeah. So I pulled out a folder and showed her all the comic work I've done. And she's like, "Why aren't you doing this anymore?" Because in that folder, I had Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. I had actually 2 issues completely done. And I was like, I don't know. So I called up the guy who was the artist, said, "Hey, do you want to continue this?" He said, "Yes." We took the best of those 48 pages and made 1 issue to make 1 story. And then we've continued, and we put out issue 2 and 3, 1 a year, as well as other projects. So we've been working on multiple things at the same time. We're wrapping it up at the end of this year. In December, should we have issue 4 out to wrap up Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. It's really exciting. Many years in the making.
That is fantastic. My light here just keeps on going out, but here's a question for you. I'm going to fix it in a second here, and it's not any questions related to how to fix my light. So in between all this time when you were raising your kid and you being out of comics, what were you doing? Like, what was your focus?
Oh, I was never out of comics. It just looked like I was. So I was running a comic store for a while. So I ran a comic store for several years, sold a lot of stuff. My biggest regret as a comic store owner is I did not order any Walking Dead from my store. So that's a big regret.
Wow. So are you still in the retail game?
No. I was just the manager. I didn't own it. So he decided to go into like Warhammer, and all that was his bigger focus. He was making more money on that end. So I did that. Sure. I now own a web design and marketing company. So okay. I went from that to owning a web design and marketing company. I'd always done a lot of marketing, especially with the film stuff. So with the comic stuff, I was doing big events. The early X-Men, the early Amazing Spider-Mans, I was putting on events at the local theaters, getting tons of people down there, handing out free comics, doing lots of free promotion. And a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, you're pretty good at marketing." And I sarcastically said, "Of course, you're here. Like, I am aware of that." And he's like, "Would you like to do it for real?" And then he brought me in. I worked for him for about 4 years, learning the ins and outs of web design and web marketing. And a lot of the stuff, Photoshop and Dreamweaver, I had been making my own sites throughout. I am a LARPer. Are you familiar with LARP is?
I have no idea.
So LARP is role playing, live action role playing.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was running groups of about 200. I was really big into it. So, but all those require websites and stuff, so I could do all that. So I was still storytelling. I just wasn't writing it down and getting paid for it.
Sure.
So I did that web design, and then like I said, my wife inspired me. I went on Kickstarter. I had a really good success and kept going.
That's fantastic. Now let's go back for a second, because one thing that I think is really interesting about your experience is you working in retail. And one thing you specifically did not fail to mention was the fact that you never ordered Walking Dead comics for your shop. So how, obviously working in retail, you got a sense of what was selling, what wasn't. And has it somehow inspired you, encouraged you with what you're doing right now? In order to figure out like what's my next project going to be, what's going to be hot, like what are people reading, that kind of thing.
Well, if it did, I probably wouldn't be writing crime, right?
Well, not necessarily. Why? I mean, Ed Brubaker, he's done a lot of noir stuff.
Sure, but think about it. So every company has a crime book, and they're always one of their lowest selling. It's not the selling, but crime has such a great history in comics, and I love crime. I mean, even movies, they're not doing crime like they did when I was a kid. Desperado, or like a Quentin Tarantino movie, or Unusual Suspects. Stuff like that. Just it's very few and far between. The last one I saw was probably I haven't seen Knives Out, which I hear is pretty good. The Gentleman was really good with Guy Ritchie, and you got Babyface. Baby Driver. Sorry, not Babyface. So they just don't do them like they used to. So I really wanted to hit that niche. But I also think crime is really hard to do, but it shows that you're really good at characters. I shows it's really good at plot development. So there's a lot of benefits to doing crime.
I agree. I think that it's funny you mentioned that, because the two genres that I actually think are really hard to pull off in comics are comedy and horror. Because like, how do you scare someone in a comic? And when it comes to comedy, how do you make someone like just literally get out of their seat and start laughing? Because it's just, like, the punchlines are there, but they're not being delivered with the gestures or the voices, Yeah. So, I mean, I have laughed when I've read comics before, but never like, it happens. It's a very hit or miss thing. As far as crime goes, I mean, like Batman, that's your quintessential superhero crime comic. But I mean, is it ever really a mystery of who done it? It's always like your list of usual suspects when it comes to Batman.
It is, but I mean, I find that they always give a good twist, like, and then the latest Batman run, the twist of how Joker stole all the money. They always do a decent twist, especially Daredevil. Daredevil always keeps.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
That's why I love those particular books. But writing, Brubaker crime or Stray Bullets crime, 100 Bullets, all that stuff is just, it's a lost art that used to be a big deal. So I like to write it, and I think that it's going to help me get to that next level. I write horror. My latest book is horror, but still, it's really about socialization of characters. And Broke Down and Forward about is you will laugh. If you didn't laugh, I didn't do it right.
I actually have to say, just your concept, it's like promising all all those things. It sounds like a Quentin Tarantino movie. It's funny you mentioned it, because I wanted to go back to it for a minute. Yeah. See, like, the one thing that I find really interesting about it, I was watching the 90s Spider-Man with my kids this morning, and they had Kraven the Hunter and Punisher in the same room. And I'm like, it'd be interesting if you saw those two characters team up, but it wouldn't actually be a team up. They would actually be in competition with each other. Right. And as soon as you told me, your pitch for Broke Down 4 Dead Bodies, it's like, you got these two main characters and they absolutely hate each other and everybody's after them. So, you got this perfect dynamic here, conceptual, concept wise, of characters who are, in a horrible position. And now it's up to you as the writer to develop them and make us care, essentially. Right. But you got that hook. And I think that's the most important thing, is having that ability to draw in the reader. Cause, I've been in this phase lately of just, I'm working on my next comic book project, and I've been reading a shit ton of comics, and I'm paying attention to all the things that, I feel are being done right, as well as the things that I think are being done wrong. But just because I think it's being done wrong doesn't mean it is being done wrong. Like, it's just my take. It's like, okay, this didn't work for me, but does it work in general? Well, obviously it got published, so, someone felt it did. But, when it comes to all those kinds of things, like what is kind of like your, sort of like scope of like, what do you go to in order to determine like, okay, this is working, this is not? Do you have an editor? Do you self-edit? Do you work off of your artist? What's your approach?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different people. So my wife is my editor, and the reason why I use my wife as editor is she was a book editor for a real long time, and also she's the one who's going to tell me if it sucks. Like, she's not going to lie to me, because she really wants me to succeed and do stuff. In fact, issue 2 is really embarrassing. The best line in issue 2 that everyone comes up to me about, I didn't write. My wife did. So that's the other one. I also have a story consultant, Chuck Pino, who does a lot of editing for a lot of books.
We've had him on the show. He was our second guest.
Nice. So Chuck and I are really good friends, and we love storytelling. We love ripping each other apart. Like, literally, like, he doesn't mind if I take his book and say, this was bad, here's why. This is bad, here's why. And the difference between me and Chuck and other people is, it's not, hey, here's what I would have done. It's, here's what you did, here's how it could have been better. A lot of people who try to help you, they really just want to write your stuff. And that doesn't help you at all.
I agree.
how do you take what I've written and make that better? And that's the difference. So Chuck, I use as a story consultant for Broke Down, where we'll go over it and I'll be like, read it. And he's like, well, this dialogue doesn't work. Or like, I'm not feeling the emotional connection here. And we go through those things. So Chuck has been a really good help when it comes to that stuff.
I think it's great that you're doing that because, I'm working right now on my outline and I chose a couple, people that I trust within the business, some contemporaries. And I let them take a look at the outline, and you're very right about that. It's about having the right kind of critic. It's not somebody who's going to be like, your concept sucks. It's like, the concept is something that you spend, days, months, years thinking about. That's just trapped in your head, and you're trying to make sense of it. So once you finally get it out there, it's out there. You've already made the decision to do it, and now you need to surround yourself with people who are going to help you make it better. Rather than break you down, you want to work with somebody that is going to help build it up. And you don't want it sugar-coated. You don't want anybody telling you like, it's okay, it'll be all right. You want someone who's going to tell you straight up, like, okay, this sucks. This doesn't work. If you do this, you're going to be disappointed with the end result, Right. And I think that, that there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, I think it's really meaningful. There's a guy who over at Mad Cave who does Savage Bastards. His name's David Galliano, and he really likes Broke Down. He's a huge fan. And he's like, hey, can you tear my book apart? And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. And I did, and it's really helped him become a better writer, because writing is really hard. Anybody can write a really good first issue. That's pretty good because you've got your idea, what you want to say, your jump off point. It's that issue 2 and that issue 3 that's really stuck, And then, as we've seen with almost every major crossover from Marvel and DC, landing the ending is really, really hard. It is. I don't care what crossover it is. You've always felt the ending for most of them. You've been like, they're all right. You don't care about it. It's that big moment in the beginning that mattered, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like even if you go back to Origin, it was once you found out who Logan was, that was like, whoa, that was the point. And then after that, not to say that it was worse or anything, but you didn't get that same type of revelation after that point. Things just kind of went on their natural path. And I agree with you. I think it's issue 1. I find issue 1s are hard in the sense that it's hard. It's like a first episode or like a pilot. How do you hook people? And in that regard, it's hard because it's always like some new thing. There's so much new stuff coming on a weekly basis. It's hard to hook people and just say, hey, read this, and it's funny because during this lockdown, one of the things that for me was really hard hitting was the fact that I can't do conventions anymore because that's where I make my money. And we'll get into that in a minute because I want to hear all about, your take on conventions. But, you're a marketing guy and you know what it's like being in our shoes. We got to get out there and push our stuff. So I haven't been able to do that. And I noticed that over the last couple of years, the one thing I haven't really been doing as much as I'd like to is reading comics. Right. So, getting back to those basics, I think is a really important thing because, I think it's important to see what's out there and what's working. And I think you make some really good observations. Most of the times from the stuff that I've been reading, it's the hard hitting stuff usually comes in the beginning and, kind of trails off. And then, you some books can, stick the landing, but some of them really can't. And I think in our positions, being independent publishers and doing the stuff on our own, we really have to try and stick that landing as often as we can, because if you don't, then you may not be able to sell enough books to keep yourself up and going. So, that's a difficult, thing to manage here. So, what about you? What's been going down with you since the lockdown? I mean, I see you're constantly out there promoting yourself and pushing. How's that been for you?
Yeah, so it was good. I mean, Voodoo Nation's my newest Kickstarter. That was a product of COVID. It came out because COVID was a thing. Me and this guy, we both had a little extra time, so I decided to write another story in between everything. But paying for my artist, Broke Down 4 would be way higher in production, but I don't have the extra money, much like you, because of conventions. I live in Florida. There's tons of conventions here. I can go to a convention every weekend. I haven't been able to go to someone. So how can I make that extra money to do so? I have sold the stores, so I've done really well. Plan C by Janet King is really good. If you're not aware of it, being on that is really good.
She's phenomenal. Yeah, we've sold lots of books through her. She's fantastic. I think she's one of those true advocates for independent comics in the retail world. And there's that's a hard thing to find, I think, because what it's like. You've worked in a retail shop, so you want to stock the stuff that is going to sell without you necessarily having to be concerned about it. Because if you order up something that you don't know of and it doesn't sell, well, then you're stuck with it, or you got to be the asshole who's pitching it to customers as they walk in. But who has time to do that? So it's a delicate matter. But Jen does such a good job with her Minute to Skim It. She's actually reading all the books. She's out there pushing it, and she connects people from all over the country, all over the world, really, with their fans. And I think that's a really powerful thing. So yeah, Plan C distribution has been, I think, a lifesaver for us in a lot
lot. Yeah. I sold over 300 books through her, which is really, really good.
Holy shit!
People resonated with the book, but again, if I sold 300 books at a convention, I would have made a heck of a lot more. Not that I don't appreciate Jen.
No, of course.
But because Jen did it, but that was really good. But I had to so I have a whole bunch of anthology stories. So I put all those together in a couple of issues, and I ran a Kickstarter for that. And that was really just me trying to raise a little bit more money, again, to help me push these money forward. I really like to keep my web design work and my comic work separate. I like them to pay for itself. And I'm good enough at both of them that I'm able to do so. But it's really, really tough,
Sure. Because even on the web design side, how much of a budget do your clients have right now to kind of keep things going? Has that been okay, or have you noticed any?
It's slow. It's mostly existing clients, me updating for COVID. Like, hey, we're open right now. Hey, we're closed right now. Hey, our mask policy changed. Like, that's where I'm making money. I'm not making a lot of new sites for keep people. It's really just existing business, keeping them afloat and making sure that they've got the latest information out to their clients. That's been the big thing. I've done a couple of new sites, but for the most part, it's been that. Just keeping them up, but nobody's doing big marketing plans or anything like that, because what are you going to do? You can market everything and then it shuts right back down. So that's been tough.
Yeah. How has that affected your morale in terms of because I mean, in Florida in particular, I remember, and I keep bringing this up because it really did. I'll never forget it. I was really looking forward to doing Tampa Bay Comic-Con. I got a booth for it and everything. I wasn't originally planning to do it pre-COVID, but then once, they announced it was happening, I actually got excited. And then of course, because of the spike, they canceled it. I'm not sure where you fell on all this, but how's your morale been in terms of, seeing all these conventions being canceled, seeing all this stagnation in terms of everything, even if you do get more sales from retailers and stuff like that, you're not seeing the same return as you would if you were doing this on your own. So how's that been? How have you been kind of managing yourself and being isolated at the same time?
Well, I'm pretty good at, turning water into wine. I'm pretty good at being very positive about those things. So I hit my local comic stores and I've done a couple of signings there. And it's more of a draw because a lot of people would spend money other places. They're coming to spend money on me because they just want to get out of the house. They want to see somebody new. They want to talk to somebody. They want to talk about comics, because you can't, if you go to a comic store, you talk to the same guys every week. If they're open and they have the same opinions, it's good to meet somebody new. So I've ran a couple of small little shows. I've got one August 1st with a whole bunch of creators here in Florida. There's 3 creators coming down to do some stuff. So that's kind of what I've done to do it. So my morale's been pretty high, and creating new things is really helping, right? I think if I wasn't creating all my books, it would be really helpful. Cthulhu Invade Odds helps a lot. So Cthulhu Invade Odds is an anthology story. So I have tons of writers and artists doing stuff. So I'm getting new art every week. So I'm not getting the negative, right? Like if it was all on my own and I was just doing like broke down, I'd be like, all right, I get 1 page a week. So that's my own morale. But with Cthulhu Invades Odds, I get new art every day, or new writing scripts or this that kind of connects with it, as well as my own existing projects. So that's keep my morale up because I'm still in the creative field. But I've seen people struggle on Kickstarter, and I've also seen people like break 10,000 on Kickstarter. So it's such a crapshoot. It's such a weird world right now.
Mm-hmm. And let's go back to, when you were working in a comic shop, what kinds of things did you notice that, because my take on it is most people who want to jump into comics. I mean, I got into this because I wanted to make money. This is my career. I will pound my chest. This is what I do to make money. Right. But there are a lot of people who, particularly on the retail side, see how difficult it is right now to like fill up a comic shop, to see comics sell, and to do all this stuff. What made you just look at that, and how do you see it? Like, are you just kind of like, well, fuck it, I'm going to just do it anyway because I love this medium so much? Or do you see it from a different point of view that, I can have my cake and eat it too?
Well, I mean, for someone who's done it a long time, right? So when I did it in 2003, I had to hustle at the table, self-fund, get my stuff there and sit at a table with everything out of my pocket, with credit cards maxed out, trying to make it work. To seeing now where Kickstarter and Indiegogo both have separate communities of comic buyers that'll never go into a comic shop. Like, it's such an amazing, different world, and they'll probably never go to a Comic-Con. Or if they do go to Comic-Con, they're super excited to see you and not Marvel Donny Cates or whoever the guy is. So
the latest guy is, yeah.
It's such a unique world. I remember my first, speaking of Tampa Bay Comic-Con, where I sat there and someone was like, hey, I came here just to see you. And I'm like, really? Why? And he told me how much he really liked the story. And that was so impressive to me. Like, wow. So he came here specifically to get my signature. So that's a big thing. When I look at the average comic store shelf, you can't even get mad at them for not hosting that much indie. Marvel and DC has forced them to buy so many books to get a variant cover so they can make sure they get $100 online to offset the rest of that quantity that they have. It's really hard to do the little bit of indie that they can. It's my job to give them incentive to go, I want to be an attraction. Let me come to your store. Let me do an online thing. Let me build my own audience for you so you can make money off of me. So I'm always making side deals, side hustles to make sure that any comic store that wants a relationship with me can, because that's what it matters. I just want to sell comics. I want people to read my stories. I eventually want to break into something bigger. My job is not to self-publish forever. That's not what I want to do. I want someone to pick me up, pay me for my work, and allow me to write for them and help them, because that's where I want to do it. I'm not about the ownership. I'm not about, a lot of people are like, I want to make this into a movie or any of that stuff. I don't want any of that. I just want to tell my stories. I want people to love what I'm doing. I want people to be encouraged and inspired that they can do it, and see how we can build this community, because I love this community. I love the comics community, and I love making comic books.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing. No matter what anybody's goal is, you really do this stuff because you love it. I don't think anybody who really works in this field can get away with it for very long doing it simply for the money. You have to have some passion for it. Otherwise, it's just not gonna come together. And there's so many nuances to making comics that if you didn't love it or you weren't interested in it, you wouldn't even get to the point where you'd have an issue one. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying before about getting that issue one out there, because that's an important step. It's like you finish that, now you can go anywhere with it. And of course, that's where you go. That's the question, and that's something that makes it challenging going forward. But if you did it once, well, then there's no reason why you can't do it again and again.
Right.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I wanted to touch base on, one of the things you said, you started reading comics again because of COVID. I mean, that's a big step. I think if I could advise any indie writer, it's read comics, because they don't. A lot of indie writers that I talked to, they got burned out, and then they had an idea. They want comics to be image comics from when they were a kid. They want Spawn, they want Savage Dragon, they want those things, but they don't understand that the audience for comics have changed. They want look at the most recent stuff on Netflix. It's, Old Guard. It's Umbrella Academy. It's The Boys. That's the stuff they want. You're not seeing Spawn or Savage Dragon or Shadowhawk, all these things that you want to recreate these things. Those aren't what's being picked up because the comic audience has matured, and what they're looking for in a book is very, very different. They want something thought provoking. They want something that they can have fun with, and they don't want it too heavy. And then, luckily, like one of the best things about COVID, I'm going to be honest, and people, I was starting, even though I'm a huge comic fan, I was starting to get burned out at all the movies. All the movies and all the DC shows. I can't keep up every week and watch 8 hours of television to keep up with all the DC shows, between Flash and Arrow and Legion and Supergirl and blah, blah, blah. I just can't. And then Marvel and DC, they were so competitive in putting out so many movies. Like, they're going to have to slow down just because of budgets wise. I don't care if you're Disney or anybody. Those movies take a lot of money to make, and you're going to have to slow down production with all the money they're not making from the parks. And I think that's going to be good and save comic book movies and give us a little bit longer, because I think we're going to become the spaghetti westerns and start burning out.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because you were I want to touch base on that. You were saying that the audience is maturing and that they're looking for other things. Well, that's kind of the cool thing about, shows like not necessarily The Boys or Umbrella Academy, but I'm going to bring up Walking Dead. Sure. I mean, there's so many more genres within comics that I don't feel like the superhero genre. I could totally agree with you that could become the spaghetti western of, cinema and all that stuff over time. Yeah. But in terms of, actually comics in general, comic book properties, I think it's kind of like novel now, in the sense that, Hollywood wants as many comic book properties as they can get their hands on, because there's a lot of cool stuff being done in comics. And if you really think about it, the comics themselves serve as storyboards for what the movie can be like. So you don't need to, you don't have to recreate everything and storyboarding as much as you do with, say, a book where you have to start from scratch and do everything. So, it's a little bit different. I mean, there's still a shit ton of work either way, but it's an interesting, it's interesting to see that comics are finally being taken seriously as a form of art that, is lucrative, and that it's not just like for kids or anything like that. And that's one of the reasons why I find that, your approach to making comics wasn't just so, direct, like I'm going to go, and just create my own superhero. Cause I mean, that's what I did. And I think you're right. Everybody wants to do their own superhero book. And it's funny you mention all that, because that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm doing it. Why am I doing superheroes? I'm doing it to show range. My current book is, I've been working on it for the last 10 years. I'm still working on it. And it's a historical based book. So, for me, it's just like, all right, I put all of my energy into this, and it's still putting a lot of energy into this, but I want to show that I can do something else too, that I'm not just pigeonholed into this category of history, that like all I can do is history. Well, no, I could do superheroes too. And I think when you show range, that's what, attracts bigger companies like Marvel and DC, and shows them that like, okay, this guy can actually, he can handle our characters. He can do stuff.
See, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, because I don't think Marvel and DC, I think they, and from what I've read from every book, they tend to not like to read superhero stuff, because they read a lot of superhero stuff on a regular basis. But what superhero does for you as a creator, it allows you to play in a lot of sandboxes, right? There's a lot of other people creating superheroes that you can do team ups and all sorts of.
Yeah, it opens up a lot of stuff.
It opens up a lot of stuff and allows you to play with a lot of stuff, and that's going to help you learn how you collaborate with other people, learn how to do a lot of things, and that's going to get your name out there, because all it takes is some famous artist like a Peach Mahana, is that how she say her last name? Does a sketch of it because she thinks the character looks cool, and then it blows up and becomes a thing. I think it's really interesting. Superheroes are a lot of fun. I'm jealous when they do these big giant like indie crossovers with all these superheroes, and I'm like, you can beat up my two crime guys if you want, but yeah, I think that I think it's really, really cool to do that. And I think it does. I definitely don't want to say it doesn't help you. I just think it helps in a different way. I think it gets you connected to a bigger community. A bigger community of other people who are doing superheroes, and I think that those people really help and show and really help and grow people. What is Tyler Carpenter is going crazy here.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, Travis has range. Well, look at that.
Oh, look
you
at
got
that.
some goddamn range.
Damn
Hey, you got to pound your chest again. You got some range.
Who knows? Who knew that?
Yeah.
Who knew that? Well, I mean, my horror book is kind of superhero-esque. It's a villain book, it's the primary villain book, Voodoo Nations. So I could see that, it's dealing with supernatural. So it's about as it's kind of like a what to compare it to, kind of like a Grendel, where there's just one supernatural guy,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's for me, I don't think it's just about necessarily showing range. It's about having an important story to tell,
right?
And telling it right. Because if I'm going to do a superhero story, I'm going to do the best goddamn superhero story that I can, especially considering that I have to put my own money into this. I'm bootstrapping it. So I expect it and know that when it's done and out there, that I'm going to sell a whole shit ton of copies of it because, it's something that I invested so much of myself into.
Yeah.
And I think it's more about that than necessarily saying, okay, I got to pick this genre to prove something. Right. Maybe I would say I'm probably trying to prove more to myself than I am to, the powers that be. Because again, I agree with you that there's no way that any superhero I come up with is ever going to be as big as a Marvel or DC character. Right. But when you look at, say, The Boys, The Boys has become its own thing, and it's all about superheroes. They created a whole bunch of superheroes. Yes, they're all archetypes, and essentially any superhero is an archetype at this point. But the way they did it, it is unique enough to the point where it's got its own following, it's got its own thing, and it is popular and it is awesome. And is it on the same level as a Marvel or DC movie? No, but I don't think it's possible for anything to really get to that point, at least in that genre right now. I mean, there's got to be some other, it's sort of like anything that comes after that is sort of like a second tier type of thing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think you can definitely find success with whatever property you come up with, so long as you're willing to do the legwork to really build it, and you have the confidence to see it through to the end.
Well, I think superheroes as a genre, I still think I do believe that you can make superheroes. Spawn is just as much of a household name as Kick-Ass, right? Both of them are superheroes, very, very different superheroes, but both of them are really well known to the mass populace. If you ask someone who likes superheroes or has read Marvel and DC, they could probably name, outside of those things, probably Kick-Ass, probably Spawn, maybe Savage Dragon, I think Invincible pretty soon. But
yes, absolutely with Invincible, I will agree with you.
But the difference is superheroes. There's a theory that I'm not sure if I buy into, that superheroes weren't made to be lasting 40, 50 years. They weren't designed for that, right? They were designed to tell stories, get to the point, switch to the new one. That's why there was so many golden age that got lost in time. I'm not sure if I subscribe to that, but I found that a lot of people who use superheroes really use them as an archetype to tell a different story in that universe that's unique, like The Boys. Like, I don't know if have you ever read Buzzkill from Donny Cates?
No, I haven't actually.
Really, really highly recommend. It's about a superhero that's powers are based off of drugs, and every drug from coffee to sugar to cocaine, heroin, and he gets various different power sets on them.
That sounds great. Is it a limited series or is it an ongoing?
Yeah. It's a 4-issue, like one and done.
Oh, that's awesome. I got to check that out then.
Yeah, but it's done specifically again to tell a specifically superhero type story in a superhero setting, but the superheroes don't really matter. It's telling a story about addiction in a superhero universe, right? So I think there's a lot of merit to that. I have a great superhero story, but I feel it would be better as an Iron Man story than as a my own superhero. But if it never comes about, I'll do it.
Right, exactly. And I've kind of come to the point now where I'm just like, there's the other side of it of why give it to anybody else?
Right.
Why give anybody that ownership of something that matters to you? Because it's just going to get streamed down the pipeline and that's it. And you probably won't see anything come from it afterwards anyway. But, it depends on what your attachment to that Marvel character is and how much you feel that story that you want to tell identifies them or shows that different light of them. And you see, and that's the one thing I notice right now is a lot of comics. It's not that they're necessarily doing anything like cutting edge, but the stories that I see people putting together are serviceable. Like, could I buy this comic and be entertained for 20 minutes? Yeah, I could be. Is it groundbreaking stuff? Is everything that I see coming out like, Will Eisner level stuff?
Sure.
No. And I think there's something to be said about that because, for me, I think it's about creating an experience that you remember fondly. But as a comics creator, I look at it from a different point of view too. I look at it from a technical standpoint of what's this creator doing right in terms of their storytelling abilities. Like, how are they moving forward? And it's kind of like what you were saying before about sticking that landing with the ending, because I think that's the most important thing. If you can't do that, I think you've lost your readers. You can tell most of the time that a lot of creators seem to have more passion when they're jumping on a series than when they're getting off of it and seeing it through to the end.
Well, and I think you see that too, especially in the superhero genre. A slow burn, you're going to get a better result. Like Brian Michael Bendis, the reason why Miles Morales worked is he was not forced down our throat. He was just the Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe, and he told basic Spider-Man stories and helped people fall in love with him. Unlike a lot of times when they produce a new character on Marvel and DC, in your face, the most powerful, the most strongest, like a Captain Marvel. They keep trying to shove her down your throat. She's cool because of this, this, and this. And we're like, yeah, but you're telling me she's cool. Let me decide if she's cool, right? I think that's why it works. Same thing with Spider-Gwen. The reason why Spider-Gwen worked, cool costume, cool concept. You just kind of sat around and you just let it sit for a minute and you liked it. Deadpool the same way. Deadpool came, had a miniseries, really, really slow burn. In fact, the early Deadpool doesn't even look like the Deadpool that you have now. And just kind of built with it, and you're like, oh, I kind of like this. Because the slow burn is what works with comics. But anytime they force a character on you, people rebel against it, and it ends up getting less of a story and less quality.
It's an interesting thing you say there. And we're talking about Bendis quite a bit right now. And what really got me back into comics in the turn of the century was the original Ultimate Spider-Man when, we brought Peter Parker into it. And it took 5 issues for him to actually bring Spider-Man into the book. He didn't even have webs in the 5th issue. It was just, but it was the story he was telling. It was how he brought it into this moment in time. And superheroes didn't exist before that. This was it. And it's something like what I heard Joe Quesada say yesterday. He's got a new show that's being premiered now where he's talking to various people on different platforms about storytelling. But one of the things he said in his trailer was, when you're telling a Spider-Man story, you're not really talking about Spider-Man. You're trying to tell a good Peter Parker story.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you're successful. If not, then you just got a guy who's in red and blue tights. Sure. And, I think that's the main thing. I think that's how we can sort of use these characters to see ourselves and, evolve them. Because I think another thing too, I've realized, and, I kind of realized that all creators, we see ourselves, even the assholes in this business, see themselves as the heroes. So in essence, it's like, we're all trying to kind of like tell, we see ourselves as the superheroes of our lives. We see ourselves as the superheroes as we're writing them as well. And, it's sort of like, can I get behind that? Can I get behind you? And the one thing I've kind of realized is I've been, also reading books from creators that I actually think are assholes, but that's not how you judge a person's ability to make a comic. You don't look at them and be like, I don't like this guy, therefore he can't make good comics. I don't think you can judge quality based off of personal feelings of somebody, right. Or, it really comes down to the work and what they're actually capable of producing.
Yeah. And it's a tough way, with Comicsgate and stuff like that to really toe that line these days. Their personal opinions seem to be more valuable than the products they produce, which is crazy talk to me, but it is. And sometimes it works out like an Ethan Van Sciver, and sometimes it doesn't,
Well, the thing for me, and I'm sorry to cut you off. Yeah, I just, I don't even know. I don't even pay attention to that. When I buy a book, it's either entertaining or it's not. And if it's not entertaining, it goes off to just throw it off to the side. I can't really see politics in comics as much because to me, it's not about the politics. It's about the story that the creator is telling. Now, if that creator has a story to tell and it's politically involved, like say Garth Ennis's 303, which quite literally has his main character, a Russian assassin, a sniper, killing George Bush. Straight up. Was it a good comic? Yeah, it was a good comic. Was it very patriotic? It was pretty much in your face. But that's what people felt in the time, and I think that as creators, it's our job to basically express ourselves. I don't agree with any one party or the other. I try to remain as neutral as possible, but I think it's kind of like ridiculous how much people feel they need to bring their opinions and judgments on things. We should all have an ability to come in here and tell whatever stories we feel we need to, regardless of our race or color or gender or sexual preference. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think there needs to be writers who are pushing agendas one way or the other. Like I really do, even though I may not agree with one of the agendas. I think that's a great thing about storytelling is you can use these platforms for whatever you want.
I agree.
I think that people like you and I, who I'm very middle of the road when I write.
Oh, hey, stop. We got to pound our chest.
It's giving those viewpoints and allowing those conflicts to resonate in our stories are really, really what's good. I want someone to tell a story about something they're passionate about. J. Michael Straczynski is writing. Basically, he knew kind of a virus like this was coming, and he kind of wrote about it in Resistance right now. It's really interesting seeing his point of view. He's extremely political. It's trying to build that. Hold on. I love Tyler's comments. Hold on. I think people buy books these days off two things. One, is it good? And two, do I like the creator? Travis says both. Oh,
I agree with with what's said there, because I don't think people buy books if they're not attached to the creators and they don't like the story. I mean, those are the two things that matter. I think before it was about the concept, but now it's about the creators. Do I like? Well,
yeah, we're in a writer's. It swings between writer's world and artist world. So right now we're in a writer's world. So the writer is right. So Jason Aaron, Donnie Cates, Jeff Johns, Tom Taylor. Those are the people who you care about right now. But that swings every few years. It swings, and it's very important for writers to understand this. Let's go back to the Image days. Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Mark Sylvester, Eric Larson, they were artists. They were the top artists because it was an artist time. They were creating, they were building, they were the names. The writer didn't matter because you can't name a lot of those writers on those books at that time. And that's really important to know that as a writer, that you have to have a personality, but you have to also be able to shut it down if it's not your time. If the artist is better to you in drawing attention, allow that artist to do it. Because I've seen tons of people where they fight, where the artist and the writer are not cohesive. That's why I think Frank Miller does so well. Because Frank Miller can talk to anybody, can do whatever he wants. But if a Jim Lee's writing a Frank Miller book, he's going to shut up and let Jim Lee talk. Because Jim Lee's the spotlight. He's better at it. And I think that's one of the things that people need to realize when they do these collaborations, especially in today's age where collaborations can make or break a comic. If you get the right art team, the right stuff, you're going to make it work. The right name, No Heroine, for instance. Chris Madd, I love his art, but I think he's way better at a cover art than he is at interior. But the book sold because the name sells really well. Frank did really well with Dead End Kids, and Chris Mannix kind of stayed out of it and let Frank sell his books, and that's why they sold 5,000 copies on day one. And on their second printing, so many variant covers that you don't even know. They've raised like $20,000 for a charity because of it, and it's an issue one that nobody's read. It's amazing that what you can do if you can find that balance and figure out where your spot is. And that's the hardest thing for writers, because like it or not, we have an ego.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. We all got an ego. And that's the thing I was going to say without poking, sticks in anybody in particular. But if you just look at everybody as everybody's an asshole, well, then now you're not judging anybody specifically for why they're being an asshole. You just kind of assume, okay, yeah, this guy's an asshole, but I'm gonna read his work anyway because I want to see what he's doing right. What Frank Gogol did with No Heroine, I agree with you 100%. I'm actually trying to hunt that book down right now because I want to see what he did right with it, And I think that's the important thing to do. And not saying that Frank's an asshole. I don't know him personally. I've been trying to get him on the show. But he's been so busy, pushing everything.
Right.
It's hopefully I'll be able to figure something out eventually. But, it'd be good to read the book between now and that point. And I think that's another thing too, is when you're looking at the business side of it and promoting everything, that takes a lot of creativity and a lot of ability to think outside the box. And I think that's a good thing that you have your wife as your editor, because you guys both have something to gain with your success. Whereas you know that she's not going to tell you something's great if it's not.
Yeah. My wife is not that type of woman. She's not everything you do is great. She will tell me, don't even produce that. Why would you work with that guy? Like she's actively doing the other way. I've been known to, I'm a passionate guy, and I'm a kind of like you said, I have a hero, like a lot of writers, I have a hero complex, right? So if I see an injustice, I'll call it out. And I'm not afraid to go live and call somebody out. But the last time I did it, I called somebody out, and I got two of the publishers of Scout. So Charlie Stickney and David Byrne, both of them messaged me and said, hey, you just got in a big fight with this dude. Who is this dude? So I started explaining who this dude was, and he's like, no, my point is, I don't know who he is, and I know who you are. You need to stop. You need to pride yourself, know the level that you're at, know where you're at. Don't start those fights anymore, because you're about to blow up. And I think that was probably the best writing advice I've ever had, because I was getting in fights because I felt my honor was besmirched. I didn't like the attitude that the way this came up with. But at the end of the day, that guy doesn't even compare to what I do in the circles. As you said, like I'm really well known in the community. I need to work on that. And by calling somebody out, that doesn't help me. That doesn't get someone feel encouraged to come ask me questions or help build the community. It breaks stuff,
Well, Travis, I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
The fact that you're able to understand this, that makes you a superhero. And the fact that you're so open about sharing it with people is also a thing. Yes, you do deserve to pound your chest for that. You deserve to pound your fucking chest, because that's the hardest thing, I think, is self-reflection, looking at it and seeing what we're doing wrong sometimes, and I got to tell you, I mean, if I'm failing in any way, I mean, as far as online promoting goes, I've just been completely demoralized by it. And I've just kind of come to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it right now. I'm just going to step back and watch what other people are doing and learn from it. And I got to tell you, I learned a lot from what you just said right now, because that's a really important thing. When we always have to see ourselves as the bigger people as creators, because we got our fan base, and the fact that you got that, because a lot of guys don't. They'll just they'll double down and they'll fucking push people out and be like, hey, I don't give a shit. You disrespected me, like, fuck off. I will never talk to you again. I don't care if you buy my work or not. And there's a delicate line to be drawn there. And it's funny, because let's go back to Frank Miller for a minute.
Yeah.
And let's talk about politics, because he made one of the most political books of all time that was an absolute disaster. And it was called Holy Terror. And let me tell you something, reading that book was a holy terror. It was a very anti-Muslim book.
Right.
And I wasn't offended by it, but I read it. And I was fascinated by how horrible this was. And I was thinking the whole time while I was reading it. Now, of course, my opinion is my opinion. Someone else who might have read that book may have thought it was brilliant and the best work Frank ever created.
Sure.
But when I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, how could the guy who created some of the best comics I've ever read, his runs on Daredevil, Batman, all the stuff that he did with those characters in particular, how could he go from that to this? Right. You know, and to me, there's also that level of learning from creators who go to those extremes. Not to say that I would go out of my way to support somebody from any extreme party or whatever, but there's some fascination in seeing what they're doing with their work, because it's like watching a train wreck, you know, or it's like, you know, when you're driving in traffic and you're sitting in line or you're waiting in bumper to bumper traffic for like 20 minutes. And, you know, you see the police sirens, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get up to that point where traffic starts moving again, and you see like two cars that have been like butt fucked, you know, and like they're just totally raped each other. And like, there you go. It's like, holy crap. But, you know, now you saw what happened. You can kind of drive on, and it's sort of like you shrug your shoulders and you move forward with your life, kind of a thing, you know. And, you know, I don't think anybody in this industry should be bashed or offended for wanting to tell their stories, you know. So that in that regard, I would say I don't agree with it necessarily, but, you know, I think it's important to know where you stand and to let other people know that you stand with them. And I admire that you're able to do that.
Yeah, it's a tough line, but I mean, you've seen it. There's so many people like a Chuck Dixon who, you know, was a childhood favorite who, you know, now is doing a lot of indie work, and his work is fine, but, you know, he doesn't get to work with DC and stuff, which is really sad. And a lot of it is because of politics. You know, there are people who can double down, and there's people who can't, and you got to know who you are. Frank Miller can double down tomorrow and say something really offensive, and he's still going to get work because
he's Frank Miller.
Because he's Frank Miller. You got to know where you're at. A lot of people want to do these lines in the sand, and they're not ready to it. You know, Robert Kirkman once said, "Why?" And it's very similar to what your superhero thing is. He was like, "Why would I work at an Olive Garden when I own my own restaurant? That doesn't make any sense." And I'd be like, well, Olive Garden is multi-franchise. It's all these great things. But it's easy to say when you have a huge restaurant, right? When you have Walking Dead and Invincible, and you print out a lot of things, and you are a hero to a lot of people, you sell more out them. But not everybody's that, right? Most people who jump over that image ship are barely making it. And people don't realize that. They think
they're operating at a loss. You know,
right.
Rick Remender was saying that the other day on Twitter, you know, like he puts out his book low. It's not operating at, like, he's not, you know, when you got an ongoing book, the sales are going to dip over time.
Right.
Because that's just naturally what happens. But, you know, you're seeing the bigger picture.
Right.
And Kirkman, I think he's one of the best writers in comics today. I think his comics, you know, like him or hate him, you know, he's putting out some great stuff, and he knows how to write comics. You know, he's not bogging you down with shit that you don't want to like, stuff you don't want to read, you know? So, but looks like we've come to the end of our episode. Travis, it's been an honest, sincere pleasure having you on the show and getting to know you a little bit. Do us all a favor. Tell us where we can find you. This is your last shout out. You know, take it away, my friend. You got the spotlight.
Yeah, if you want to check out Voodoo Nations, that's my latest Kickstarter. You can buy Broke Down on it, or you could buy Voodoo Nations. You can buy the whole thing. That is at Voodoo Nations on Kickstarter. You can find me at brokedown4deadbodies.com. You know, you can find me there. You can find me at Jester Lou on Twitter or Instagram. And just find me on Facebook, Travis Gibb. That's where I'm mostly active. And one thing before I go, Tyler said, so now no more live battles. No, I will absolutely battle somebody. But if I battle you, that means I think you're on my level. So good job.
Excellent. What are these battle vids real quick?
Basically, I've noticed once you get to a certain level of internet fame, I've noticed there's a few people who like to poke fun at you to see if they can gain readers, and they tend to do it right before they launch a Kickstarter. And I had two people who came up with who did that to me, and I fell for it both times, and I'm just not going to fall for it again.
Gotcha. All right, man. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. It's been a
No
pleasure
problem.
hosting you. And I look forward to meeting you in person once the convention scene picks back up.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Take care, sir.
Thank you.
Yep. What a great episode. Great guy. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow we got Onward with Onrie coming back on. I just finished the episode right now. It's a 14-minute episode. It's excellent. You're going to enjoy it very much. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Next week we got new guests coming on for Live with Onrie. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I'll see you guys then. And until that time comes, onward to victory.